It's so bad. She looks like a psychopath. I think like apologizing to all of Poland at this point. I really should stop trying to make some fan art of whatever comic I or game I like. Ah. Welcome to this new episode of the Count. Now, my segue may seem a bit obscure, but there is a guy in Montreal who makes a D&D comic, and he's from Poland. And sometimes I draw inspiration from various bit comics, games, movies, or and more for when I practice my drawing because COVID a bit. So today we're gonna delve into Poland, with as my main source of information for Poland is history of Poland, the history of Poland by Adam Zamoyski. He has an index where he gives, I should say an annex, where he speaks, instructs us on the pronunciations of a few letters of the Polish version of the Latin alphabet so that we can read them properly. Don't remember them all. Nonetheless, let's get in. When I say Poland, first thing to come to mind, rock.
Stanislav Lem,
In turn,
the Pope that destroyed the Soviet Union.
oh, so not necessarily what I would have expected from both. Okay, maybe from third, but these are good points. History of Poland is not well known for by people outside of Poland, but my main point for this video will be the fact that Poland is basically a crusader state. Now, you have the four original of le comté d'Édesse, la principauté d'Antioche, le comté de Tripoli, and le royaume de Jérusalem. Eventually, Cyprus would become one. Granted, we could include the likes of Portugal, Leon, Castile, Aragon. But those in the Holy Land are a bit closer to what Poland was. And there are a number of parallels, but I will still spare you the 40 minutes and more essay and try to be concise. Oh, and by the way, for information on the Crusade and Crusader states, I've used the writings by Jacques Le Goff, Régine Pernoud, and the excellent chain Real Crusade History. Now, starting off, you must know that Poland was, for the first half of the medieval period, just a place where people minded their own business, and there was some type of zone around. There was an area around it where there were groups of people fighting each other, but it kind of created. There's a French word tampon, zone tampon. There's not quite a no man's land, but you get the idea. So they were minding their own business for the most part. Eventually, in the second half of the medieval period, Poland coalesced into a state of its own. And then we start with the parallels. Now, for the one of the most important part is that Poland is intimately intertwined with the Crusades. Mainly the Northern Crusade, but was eventually implied in battles to the south, especially against the Ottomans, and the Great Polish victory at Vienna in 1683 that everyone compares to the Rohirrim upon the field of Pelennors, which, fair enough, even if in the books Rohirrims are more based on the French, but that is for another episode. So, the Northern Crusades, for those who don't know, Christians in Northern Europe, but also on the frontier, because Poland is on the frontier between Central, Eastern, and Northern, and at the apogee of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was kind of upon all three. So, back in the day, there were lots of raids, missionaries were killed, Christians were taken into slavery, and of course that didn't sit well with the church, who always have been the greatest force of fighting against slavery. So what happened is that there was no constant crusading for a while. And of course, when that front was settled, well, there were the Ottomans. So as you can see, it was an essential part of the kingdom history. And of course, as it go with it, the chivalry orders were implied. So of course, we've got the standard orders that were in the Holy Land, the Teutonic Knights, or by their real name, the Ordre de Sainte-Marie des Teutoniques, and quickly went from the Holy Land to the northern front, from Prussia. And by the way, originally, the Holy Roman Empire, and Prussia, so the Germans, were friends with Poland, but at some point it turned sour, especially that we had there were the likes of Frederick II and Stephen, which went and just caused a lot of trouble. He basically tried to take over the Holy Land, caused a lot of trouble. So, and of course, the Teutonic Knight getting away from the original mission eventually became tools of the Emperor, and Prussia eventually became just another German kingdom with a standard aristocracy and a laïc government, rather than being a knightly state with an elected ruler. Of course, the Teutons were not the only other in the regions. There were a few more. So, as you can see, already a few similar points. Of course, just like the Crusader states usually had some of the best, and at the Templars who could on more modern times be compared to the French Légion étrangère or the Quebec soldiers. They were the elite and the best of the best. Poland had quite a similar reputation, and for a while did have the best army in Europe. So on top of all of these, next point, I said that Poland was at the crossroad between three regions of Europe. And the Holy Land is literally the cornerstone between Asia, Africa, and Europe. So both were cosmopolitan, multicultural, and multi-religious states. You had a lot of several types of people. So over there we have Franks, Armenians, Arabs, Jews, Greeks, and many more. Over there you have several types of Slavs, Balts, Scandinavians, Germans, some Magyar that came from Hungaria, and of course at some point the Mongols showed up. So they had some Mongols and other similar groups. I forgot the Turks over there, but there was also Turkey over there. So lots of people from different ethnicities, they managed to live in peace. The various religions inside the state managed to live in peace. In Poland, they had no conflict of religion and almost skipped over the Renaissance, while in the crusader states, it was considered dangerous or while they were behaving because, and that is from Muslim intellectuals and chroniclers, they said that a Muslim better lived under Christian rules, and by that they mean the crusader rule, not the Greeks, for they received better justice. They did not have a civil war every time there was a passation of power, so they had stability, and it was economically quite prosperous. So overall, the condition of life were better off under crusader than under Muslim rules, and this came the great fear that they would flee to the crusader states and eventually even defend them to protect their new way of life. And still on the refugee things, and having a better way of life, well, a better life. Whenever something bad happened to Jews, they fled to Poland. Germans make some pogrom, go to Poland. Philip Cat goes mad, go to Poland. Gold century of Spain, go to Poland. So there were a lot of Jews in Poland by the time of, and most of the Jews in Europe were in Poland by the time of the Second World War, and thus the country's tolerance got them to be the host of some really bad events. Now, going back to the crusading, so all of the people in both states managed to live in peace, and so did their faiths. And well, both states were Catholic on the institutional level. It was, we're a Catholic state, we have a Catholic population, everyone is welcome, just keep to yourself, don't bother people, don't force weird things on people, you know, everyone live and let live, be nice, don't cause us trouble, and we'll keep the peace. And it worked. There were also, both states were also some of the most advanced on the electoral point. Now, saying that they were democratic would be wrong. Being democratically advanced would be a bit more correct, but still not quite in the spirit of the thing. Nonetheless, electing a king was pretty normal, and beside that, normally a king would have to be accepted by, it was the High Court in Jerusalem, and in Poland it was the Sejm, which was their parliament made of the Slacho, which was the name for the fighting elite, because aristocracy would not have been quite the proper word. Elections in both cases were relatively frequent, and originally a ruler, when there was a, before Poland became fully an electoral kingdom, and during all of the history of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, a king had to be approved by the court Sejm. Of course, when there was some abuse, of course there was the coup d'etat made by Guy de Lusignan, who fled because during the civil war caused by the Nord-Aquitaine ended up in Cibizarre, caused a coup d'etat, caused the Atin disaster and the fall of Jerusalem. So there was a big catastrophe. On a similar point, Poland did have the flood, deluge in French, that happened. So Sweden gathered massive armies and tried to take over everything and caused more damage than World War II. So this weakened both places greatly, and they never fully recovered. But this is not what finished them off. So as I said, so for the finishing off, there was a bit of a problem called anarchy. The Kingdom of Jerusalem eventually had problems because of the merchant cities. These so these Italian cities had caused a civil war and brought everyone down with them. This prevented such great ideas as alliance with the Mongols. Saint Louis eventually made a truce that lasted for some time, but then that was not enough. They only finally put all the threats aside at the end. And at the end, completely, they put their threats aside and they fought at Saint Jean d'Arc until the city fell, and with it brought the end of the continental presence. Cyprus lasted for a while, and of course, upon all of that, they also were surrounded. And when the Ottoman arrives, well, surrounded and outnumbered. On a similar point, Poland, what happened with them? Russia, Prussia, and Austria all banded together against Poland. So outnumbered it, but Poland had one major problem. It had one great flaw, and it was the requirement of unanimity, which meant that any one person could block it and make things cease to work. Kings have tried, all the great kings, at the end of the list, Jean III Sobieski, the great winner of the Battle of Vienne, tried to reform, but because there was always that one guy, never could. And because they could not reform they could not get rid of the unanimity component, and because of that, it was too easy to block, and at some point the country fell into anarchy. It had no government. Raising and organizing the army became impossible, and that's when they were surrounded by vastly higher numbers. And so, despite having the best army, the country was consumed. Now, to end on something a bit more positive, after the fall of such a great country, it is interesting to know that both countries had great relationship with France. Now, Poland, when I said that they almost skipped the Renaissance, to give you an idea, well, at the time, relations with the early Roman Empire were really bad. So Lutheranism was really badly seen. It was this German barbaric thing that they didn't like, while Calvinism was French, therefore looked civilized, and so there were way more Calvinists than Lutheran in Poland, but even there they were a minority, and eventually everyone went back to the Catholic team. The people from both countries went to universities. French people, there's quite a number of French that were welcomed to the title of king and other position in Poland. there were many great relations by the both, and similarly, the French were the core of the crusading force. There were there was a lot of trade, many great relations, rulers that were sent, and so on. So both the Latin state of Orient and France had great relations. So if we resume, both Poland and the Kingdom of Jerusalem were tied to crusading, had a lot to do with the Chivalrous Order, had great troops, were a multi-ethnic, multi-religious place where people lived in peace, were thought of as a place to go and take refuge, had a massive they had an electoral component, which was very important to their name. They were ruled in a we're Catholic, we don't take trouble, but we don't want to cause any attitude. Foreign rulers, and by the way, Poland also had some Scandinavian rulers. They had some from a few places. So yeah, foreign rulers were a thing. Great relation with France. Originally great relation with Germany, but it went down the drain. And it all ended when trouble began and anarchy / civil war prevented them from accessing their full force, and while at the same time being vastly outnumbered and surrounded. So I hope this relatively concise episode will have shown you why I consider Poland as a crusader state very similar to Poland, and that both can be used in a way to help understand the other. On this, I bid you all farewell, and until the next episode of the Count County.